What up, YouTube? Thanks for tuning in. Before I officially begin, I'm just going to throw a disclaimer up. This is an opinion piece. I'm not a doctor. Follow your local laws. This video is designed for harm reduction and optimal experience for adults. Also, please note this is not a discussion of the physical risks and benefits of psychedelics. Only note I will make in that regard is a general recommendation to not combine the psychedelics with any other medication or alcohol, especially. I'm looking forward to a world in which these substances are illegal and destigmatized and highly studied and can be openly discussed with healthcare providers. In the meantime, educate yourself and use caution. Yeah, there's tons of videos already about physical risks and benefits, so I'll leave you to watch those. This is about something I haven't seen discussed, so I thought I would make this video, which is the interpersonal / social. I was originally going to call it social emotional risks and benefits, but I think interpersonal sounds a little snappier and encompasses both. Anyways, first time following a script. I'm going to go a little bit off script, but mostly I'm going to try to stick with the script. So one more thing, trigger warning. I talk some about childhood abuse and suicide, so hopefully that's therapeutic for you to hear. If you've gone through similar issues, obviously I haven't committed suicide because I'm here, but my best friend has, but we're going to get to that. Anyways, we're going to start now. So, hello. Again, thanks for tuning in. So I've been thinking about making this video for some time. Seems like more and more talk about psychedelics is becoming mainstream. Some landmark studies using them, specifically psilocybin, magic mushrooms, for treatment-resistant depression, and MDMA for PTSD, showing results far beyond more traditional treatment options. With therapy, keep in mind that the therapy is an important part, because people have been doing these in all sorts of settings for a long time, and the setting is indeed very important. So, there are likely already many video essays describing these studies, and while they are exciting, using psychedelics in a setting like this, with the amount of care provided in such studies, will be out of reach for most people. Even if they do become legal in your country, the cost of such treatment will be in the thousands, potentially over $10,000, not to mention the time factor. So, yeah, if you're lucky enough to be in a clinical trial, it's amazing, but yeah, for the average person, these studies are not, they give you a pill and you talk to a therapist one time. Again, I'm not going to go into them in that much depth, but it's many therapy sessions. I think 3 therapy sessions before the psychedelic use, and then a session with 2 therapists for, I believe, 8 hours before the trip comes on, during the whole trip, and then for about an hour afterwards, or maybe a couple hours afterwards. Although afterwards is a fuzzy line, like where does the trip officially end? So if you think about a psychiatrist or a psychologist, how much their time is worth, times 3 hours, I think 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour, 8 hours, and then I believe there's 3 more non-psychoactive sessions, and then another psychedelic session. So it's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. So anyway, hence this video. Again, I'm not recommending any illegal drug use, just to say it again, but people are going to do what they're going to do, and if they're going to do it, they should do it safely. So, back on script. So, for better or worse, the vast majority of people will be using psychedelics on their own, or very often with a romantic partner or group of friends. This video is aimed at those people, and could also be seen as a list, as a list of things I would have told myself if I could go back in time and do so. I will also talk about the potential risks and potential benefits of underground ceremonies, retreats, shamans, and the like. Even in the best case of legalization, these types of events will be on offer, so it makes sense to discuss them. When explaining anything and trying to make that memory, idea, or experience stick, you have to coat it with emotional glue, so to speak. This goes for private solitary learning as well as learning from social experiences. You have to, as Nietzsche said, as Nietzsche said, sort out your why. How much emotion to apply is a tricky art, however. Bear with me, I'm going to explain this a little more. In making this video, I'm happy to apply the same tools I suggest to use in this video. I'll explain what I mean now. We all know oversharers. Our internet age makes oversharing easier than ever. And yet, as we all seem to know by now, the constant variety of information, the never-ending flow of it. For instance, 3.7 million YouTube videos are uploaded every day. It would take 31 sleepless years to watch it all. And that's just every day. You never catch up. Yeah. And the never-ending flow of it exhausts us all to the point where the average person is less attentive to and more overwhelmed by information than ever before. This goes not just for online people, you guys, anyone interacting online, but people in real life. Because most people in real life are also online. They're busy with their jobs, their families, same as they always have, but now they just have this extra influx of information. The art of focus, deciding on what is relevant, what is worthy of our attention, is more important than ever before. So, back to psychedelics. One of the joys and often anxieties produced by them is a massive influx of new ideas, perceptual shifts, new ways to see the world. Imagine your different brain regions like teams of office workers usually keep to themselves and focus on their very specific tasks in their specific departments, taking a break from their usual routine ways of processing information, have a giant party, collaborating with each other, and talking to others within different departments that they ordinarily wouldn't even see. Like any party, it's likely most of the ideas they have fun with will be infeasible and absurd, but you're bound to get some good ones as well, and potentially a clearer picture of the organization as a whole. To take the analogy further, you may also hear from workers whose voices may not usually be heard during the flow of the usual workday. In my experience, this is especially true in the beginning of the trip, where you become more open to what psychoanalysts would call your id, and Carl Jung would call your shadow. So, yeah, there's parts of you that are repressed, and they're going to come out, which is an important part of healing, I think, because, I don't know, one of the joys of life is to move forward as an integrated whole, and I think that's when people do their best work, when people feel their best, when they're not having their foot half in the door and half out, whether in a relationship, a job, anything, ambivalence and insecurity and confusion, these all go hand in hand. But sometimes you have to go through that, you bring everything to the surface. You can make parallels with society. When everyone can be heard, it's kind of a good thing. It's like the internet. That's what I'm trying to say here. Psychedelics is just like all this stuff is coming up at once, kind of like in our internet age. Every person's opinion is coming at you at once, and it can be overwhelming. So hence why it's more important to focus than ever before. And I'm going to get to the oversharing thing. So let's tie this back to the interpersonal aspect. If one chooses to do psychedelics alone, it will be a vastly different experience than doing it in company. And again, I'm not going to make any suggestions or recommendations, but doing it alone it's vastly different, and you can really focus on yourself. But life is, things that are fun are often more fun to do with other people, and they can be therapeutic with other people, but it's a whole nother layer of complication. So that's hence this video. Anyways, it will be vastly different experience than doing it in company. Alone, you can let the experience go in whatever direction it goes without distraction. In such a setting, it would be recommended to have a notebook, but not your phone, as the temptation to text or call others may be strong. And I would recommend that in a group setting too. You should focus on the people you're choosing to be with and not use your phone. That's my opinion, as is this whole video. I may make a video just on this later, but for the sake of the video, I may make a video on doing it alone later, but for the sake of the video, let's assume you're with one or more others. You click the video title, that's what I'm talking about. So, whether the other person is sober or not will change the experience. In the interest of time, I will talk generally with side notes on the difference between being with someone who's sober and also tripping companions. Firstly, figure out your intention, whether emotional healing or just having a good time, ideally both. Emotional healing doesn't have to be this huge burden. Often it can and should be also a good time. Why are you choosing the people who are around you? Is there any pressure? This is a huge component and can have a profound impact, positively or negative, on the experience of all involved. Taking of any psychoactive substance should be done with enthusiastic consent. You should never pressure anyone to have this experience with you, let alone dose them without consent. I mean, that's a crime, and that should always be a crime regardless of the legal status of any drug, or lie about the dosage. Anecdote, I knew a woman who admitted she gave her 16-year-old son, who was suffering from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, MDMA, ecstasy, Molly, and told him it was CBD, which is a non-psychoactive substance within the marijuana plant. This is cognitive assault, and regardless if your intentions are good or not, this is not your choice to make. Imagine the kid, he's like feeling amazing, his probably physical pain is massively reduced, and then he realizes this is not a sustainable experience. This is like, he's been lied to. His mother, who's trying to help him, is also crazy and probably harming him. Like, just never do that, ever. I don't care if someone is dying in your family and you just want them to have this experience because you had a beautiful experience. It's not your decision. Just think of it like sex. It's consent or not, and just don't pressure people ever. You can tell them your experience. You can encourage them. Again, because of legal reasons, I'm not going to say encourage. Don't encourage anybody. Just share your experience, and that's it. Most pressure, taking it off the anecdote now, is much more subtle. For example, we should all do it so we're all on the same wavelength. Guarantee you will not be on the same wavelength. Everyone is affected differently. Not to say you can't feel on the same wavelength, but don't let anybody pressure you, or don't pressure anybody else just so you can feel more connected. That's actually a lot of what I'm talking about here. If you're in, be in. If not, just observe others. Say you're the sober person, which hopefully all this will be useful to you as well. And probably people will make mistakes that I mentioned here, that I've made. And as a sober person, you have to take it all with a grain of salt, because they may not have watched this video. Anyways. If you're in, be in. If not, observe others, which can be healing and informative in itself. Like with sex, if you feel overly pressured to participate when you're not all in, this is probably not someone's, a person, people that you should be participating with anyway. So, assume you've got an intention. It doesn't have to be some grand thing. You won't be able to dictate your experience anyway. You might have like the intention on a mushroom trip to like, I want to figure out how to make more money. And then you just have these crazy profound experiences where you're just like connected with some universal energy, like, and just the idea of money and making dollars or pounds or euros or yuan or whatever you're into is just like totally out the window. So make an intention just for the sake of making an intention, but yeah, don't take it too seriously, and don't try to force yourself to stay too narrow, because it's not going to work anyway, which is part of the beauty of it, part of the beauty of life. You're going to get more than you bargained for. Anyways, yeah, doesn't have to be some grand thing. You won't be able to dictate your experience anyway, and someone or someone's around you that you trust, you should talk about the setting and everyone's expectations for each other. So have an intention, talk to the people you're with, let them make sure they understand your intention, they can support your intention, understand their intentions, support their intentions, and just sort out your environment. Make sure people's phones are off. Make sure no one's got to work that day. No one unexpected is going to come over. Just get it together. Some people who, this is during the trip, some people who are feeling high intensity may want to be alone. Others may want to be intensely social and feel the support of the others or the group. And you may alternate between the two. So you don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know whether you're going to want to just be really close to people and intimate, or just like, I just need to be by myself. But for the being by yourself can also be part of a group experience, because you come together at the end, hopefully, and talk about what you've been through and integrate. So, and you may alternate between the two. If the others are sober, I'll use the term others instead of saying others, just for ease of use. I'll use plural from now on. All this could be a sole other, be just a single person. They should be able to communicate your needs. If not, if others are sober, they should be able to accommodate your needs. If not, they may have wildly different needs than yours, which could lead to problems. So you should have the intention to take care of yourself as much as possible, to use the group support, but not to lean on the group or have anybody lean on you, because tripping people can't really properly take care of other tripping people. I mean, you can, maybe you will, but you shouldn't depend on it. I'll use another anecdote to illustrate potential pitfalls of just winging it, rather than discussing everyone's responsibilities for themselves and others. So, I was with two guys, let's give them very generic names, Mike and Matt. We were at Matt's house. Young guy, he'd listened to some Terrence McKenna videos, and he felt quite ready to hold space for Mike and me. He was sober, and we tripped. We had no particular plan besides just to hang out and see where the night took us. This in itself is not necessarily a terrible thing, but again, a discussion about roles and taking care of each other beforehand would have been useful. Anyway, about an hour in, Mike, the guy who's tripping with me, started complaining of being sick. He said he needed to lie down. Something in me was very suspicious for some reason, but Matt was eager to provide care. Matt was just like this very enthusiastic, like, I'm going to take care of you guys. Everything's going to be okay. Just leave it to me. So he let Mike come in his room. He let Mike lay down in his bed, and then they were talking. I felt annoyed, and I said I wanted to come into the room, but Matt said he needed to give Mike his full attention and locked me out of his room. Meanwhile, in the living room, Matt's sister had come home and was watching Walking Dead. For those who don't know, it's a post-apocalyptic zombie show with people eating each other. I didn't think this was quite the right environment for me, so I went out to sit in the garden, which was indeed quite peaceful. 10 or so minutes later, I hear loud yelling. Long story short, Mike had admitted that he was bisexual and had a crush on Matt. These guys were like best friends. Matt was not feeling this at all and told us we both need to get the hell out of his house. He angrily drove us to the game store where Mike worked. Unfortunately, he had the key to. So think about this. We're both like tripping, going through this like vulnerable experience, and then this guy's like angrily driving us away from where we were supposed to be. He angrily drove us to the game store. Fortunately, Mike had the key, so he let us in. We ended up lying down on these two gaming tables in the back room. Think about like tables where people play Magic the Gathering. They had chess tournaments there. Really cool spot. RIP. Went closed down forever. I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, too few spots like that these days. Third places where people can go besides on the computer, of course, but that's a subject for another video. Anyway, we just lay there, talk to each other until Mike fell asleep on the table, and then I got up and I went on the store computer, and another employee had his like Facebook logged in. Obviously, I didn't check his messages or anything, but I was just kind of looking at his feed and just thinking about how different it is from mine, and just thinking about how like everybody's different, you know. Typical stuff. And then I finally probably fell asleep at like 6 in the morning, and then the shop opened at like 8 or 9 and we had to get out. Yeah, sleep hygiene. Keep that in mind too. I think I get to this later. Anyways, I was considering being roommates with these guys. Needless to say, that plan did not come to fruition. So you can see many things that went wrong here. And yeah, I'll get to this again later, but don't reveal things you've been keeping secret that another person might react negatively to during these experiences. Try to talk to it before. Try to talk about it before. Yeah. So anyway, back to generalities. Under the effect of psychedelics and MDMA, which is quite different, but which I'll lump into the psychedelic category for the sake of this video, your mind becomes very sensitive. Scientists call what happens the reopening of the critical period. I linked to an article down below in the journal Nature in the description. Basically become quite sensitive and vulnerable like a child again. In the right setting, it can be highly therapeutic, and in the wrong, it can cause more trauma. So when you're an adult, things just don't affect you as much. When you're a kid, you're just soaking everything in, for better or worse. Trauma, love, both. You hear kids talking about this one adult who, they might have had a very traumatic life otherwise, but this one adult was so supportive of them, and that just gave them the strength to carry on. Or another adult or another kid abused them, and that made their whole life really, really hard. So keep in mind, you're like opening yourself in this way, and it's some real stuff. So take it serious. That's why it's healing in a very, very therapeutic setting. And maybe in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, when people were like doing this at raves and concerts with like 8,000 other people and just bouncing their energy off of everybody, and kissing and making out and dancing till 3 a.m. and having these beautiful experiences, but maybe also having terrible experiences. This is just not the way to go, in my opinion. So yeah, anyway, take multiple people with insecure attachment, put them all on psychedelics without a clear plan or proper boundaries, and things can go quite badly. So this is going to be a long video, probably about halfway through. Alright, I got this printed double-sided. I swear I know how to read. Regardless of others' actions, I think it's important to tell oneself beforehand that if you feel like you want to be alone, that you can take that time to yourself. So if you say you want to be alone, no one should follow you. Unless they're physically concerned for your safety, which if you take all the precautions necessary should be the case. And you have to be willing to trust the person and just stay hydrated, number one thing. But if your heart rate or something, if you have an emergency, you have to trust that person to take care of you and get you the medical attention you need. But if it's just they're being needy or overly clingy and controlling, that's not good. So if you want space, take space. Regardless of others' actions, I think it's important to tell oneself beforehand, if you feel like you want to be alone, that you can take that time to yourself. Ideally, if you need more emotional support, then those you're with can provide it. But remember that they may not be able to, and you have to accept that. So that's just life. We want things from other people, and they may or may not be able to provide it. So don't be too clingy or needy or upset if people can't give you exactly what you need, and just take a breath and try to give it to yourself. But hopefully the people around you are very supportive. Wanting support and feeling abandoned during an experience like this can be quite rough and cancel out or even overwhelm any healing you may experience. So again, be mindful who you choose to associate with, and especially have these experiences with. So let's move on to taking psychedelics with romantic partners. Sounds lovely in theory. You can get cozy and intimate, reveal parts of yourself that you've never felt safe revealing before, accept yourself and your partner on a whole nother level. Ideally, yeah. In practice, once again, caution and planning is advised. For example, say you take MDMA and feel in a really warm, safe space of self-acceptance, and you want to be as honest and real as possible with your partner. You may admit something bad, perhaps an infidelity, maybe even only an infidelity in a past relationship, but this is still a big deal. And I would not advise to do this under the influence. Even if your partner, perhaps also feeling really empathetic and loving, forgives you in the moment, it's unlikely that warm glow will last, and you'll have to discuss it again the next day. And it may well ruin the experience either during or afterwards. You may think, now that I feel this love, I know I'll never betray them again. You may also feel so great you decide you'll never eat brownies again, and you're going to take really good care of yourself from now on, and a million other things. These hopes for yourself are beautiful, but having a good life involves making positive decisions when you're high and when you're low. Now, if some betrayal in the relationship has already happened and is mostly resolved, yeah, then maybe it's a good time to talk about it. But even there, caution is advised. To me, the ultimate value of these tools is remembering that these higher level states are possible. If someone's been severely depressed or anxious for weeks or even months or years on end, it may just seem like your brain is incapable of peace or hope or joy in the moment. The ideal, in my opinion, is to catch a glimpse of your best self that is strong, appreciative, less afraid, and to take note of all the steps you'd like to make in your day-to-day life to keep that feeling going. Because one of the criticisms of drugs is you shouldn't need to take drugs to feel good. You should design your life so you feel good. And actually, I agree with that, even though I'm talking here about drugs. The ideal drug is one that you don't need to take all the time, that kind of makes you realize what you want to do for yourself. And some people will think yeah, that's unrealistic. You're never going to feel like you do on drugs. That's why people take drugs. But there are studies of people who've meditated for 20, 30 years, put them in an MRI scan, and their brains are vastly different from ours. They're what is it called? Should have wrote this down. The default mode network. That's the network when you're not really doing anything, you're just kind of sitting around. You generally default to. And most of the contents of your default mode network are self-referential thoughts. I, me, my thoughts. So just worrying oh, I shouldn't have said that to her or him. What am I going to eat for dinner? A lot of them are relational because we're social animals. Worried about a conflict between your husband, your wife, your kids. A lot of them are anxious, ruminating thoughts. And on psychedelics, a lot of that will turn off and you'll really be in the moment more and you'll be more positive. Again, I don't want to tell you what you will be. You could have a scary experience and it's important to be prepared for that. But usually at some point in your experience, especially on MDMA, you will have just kind of a warm feeling of self-acceptance, of more acceptance of the world. And this network will turn off. But you can meditate and this network will also turn off. Not for a week or 2 weeks or a month. I mean, it's like the 10,000 hour rule. And it's kind of scary to think there's only 8,000 hours in a whole year. So to log 10,000 hours, if you meditate an hour a day, that's only 365 hours. So most people are not going to be able to feel like how they do on a psychedelic trip, in day-to-day life. But to say that it's totally impossible is wrong. I mean, again, I don't know what people's experiences are like. I'm just talking about brain scans. But you can get close to them. You can remember you don't need to feel like this all the time. It's just good to remember that your brain has the capacity to feel like this. You have the capacity, just like if you've been sick for a long time. You have the capacity to breathe, or if you've been injured and you're weak, and then you get back into running or going to the gym or whatever you're into, you're wow, my body can do this. So I mean, to me, that's one of the most healing aspects, is that your brain can feel this. You might think it's fake because it's not sustainable, but not to get all Buddhist on y'all, but nothing is sustainable. Every emotion is subtly changing every second, and then over the course of 10 years, I'm a totally different person than 10 years ago and 10 years before that. So off script for a minute. So anyway, to be able to support one's partner or friends in that, sorry, I'm totally off script. To be able to support, one's partner or friends in that higher brain state can be more powerful and reinforcing than going through it alone. But in a vulnerable state, it's easy to go wrong as one's usual filters are not in place. Like with alcohol, although totally different from alcohol. I mean, we've all been with people who are drunk, who are oh, you're amazing, oh, you're the most wonderful, beautiful person, but they're drunk, so you don't take them seriously. Now this, in my opinion, is far superior. medicine, but you can also go wrong, and you're also going to be in a totally altered state. So you might actually genuinely think all these things, but thinking stuff is nothing. To act on it, to integrate it into your life is everything, which is why I think the psychedelic therapy is effective, because you don't just take it and then go back to your J job and arguing with your wife. You take it and integrate it. So, yeah. Also, I must share my opinion that it's not ideal to take psychedelics on a first date or even a fourth or fifth date. This might seem like, what kind of idiot would do that? But, yeah. Anyway, I've done that. It's easy to feel like these can be a tool to rush intimacy, but you really shouldn't try to do that. You'll often end up getting hurt, putting too much onto the other person, or taking too much of them onto yourself. Vulnerability may be a buzzword these days, but it's not always good. You have to think about why you would want to be vulnerable to a person you don't really know yet. Is that really such a good idea? Spoiler alert, no, it's not. Also, worthy of mention, since we're talking about romance, are potential sexual side effects. MDMA in particular has a reputation as a sex drug. To quote rapper Fat Joe, "We be freaking all night like we was on E." Sorry, I'll never do that again. And it may be that way for some, but it tends to intensify my sex drive for the first hour. And after that, it drops off rapidly. So I'm just not. I think it's because I have so much pleasure chemicals in my brain, and you kind of need a little bit of that itch, that frustration to kind of want something you don't have. And on MDMA, I don't really want that much. I mean, there's part of me that wants a lot for my life and a lot for the world. It's very open and beautiful, but in the moment, there's not that kind of lust. That's why appetite, for me and for most people, just totally goes away. You could put the most delicious food right in my face, and I could look at it kind of objectively and be like, oh, that's really beautiful. But the desire, the craving, dukkha, as Buddhists would call it, is just supremely diminished. So, anyway, so my sex drive drops off rapidly, although I become highly sensitive to touch. So it's important to not have too many expectations. Otherwise, your partner may expect a wild ravishing and instead get a guy talking about his feelings for 4 hours. So this does happen. Again, expectations. This segues into, or you could be super aroused, and your partner could be, and you could make love for a long time. So you don't know, but just be aware that you might have technical issues, and that could be like an emotional difficulty as well, because these things can create, oh, am I not attractive? Why are you? Yeah, that whole thing. This segues into one more aspect worthy of mention and potential harm. This applies especially in cases where one person is tripping balls and the other is sober. One of the joys of psychedelics is you pretty much don't get bored. Your curiosity levels go through the roof, and you really start honing in into either the external world or your inner world, or both. When you're by yourself, it's more inner. When you're with other people, it's more external. I think they're both very valuable. On the other hand, your sober partner who's trip sitting might actually be a bit bored. If you're intensely quiet and inner concentrated, they may be bored. If you're talking a mile a minute about your theory of everything, they may be bored. If they're insensitive and express it outwardly, you might get your feelings hurt. Or you might feel pressure to entertain them, neither of which is ideal. Hence, you should make sure there are things set up for both your comfort and theirs, and ideally give them a little bit of freedom to leave the room, backyard, wherever you are, to take care of their own needs at various points. So, if you have a trip sitter, even the most kind, sensitive, loving person, you should give them, if you're feeling very content and safe within yourself, you can tell them, hey, if you want to step out, please do. And they might say no. They might not be bored. I mean, chances are they won't be. They're probably super curious about what you're going through, because you're just their guinea pig, and they're just wow, this is interesting. Whether or not they ever want to do it, it's kind of immaterial, but they can experience you, and probably you'll be pretty interesting. But Again, something to be aware of, because to you, just lying on the couch, looking at the ceiling and just feeling these emotions you haven't felt in many years, like, it might be a profound experience, but if they're sitting on the couch next to you, not looking at their phone, not reading, not distracted, hopefully they're a very present person and that's like their everyday life. But for a lot of people, it's tough. It's tough for people to support each other. I mean, that's why the world is the way it is. Anyways, just something to keep in mind. I think as children, growing up in various degrees of dysfunction, we often fantasize about finding a person or people who we can be totally open with, let it all hang out and be fully accepted. But part of growing up is realizing everyone has their triggers, and while it's no good to walk on eggshells, as maybe we had to do in our family of origin, it's important to have discernment about what to say, when to say it, and how to say it for the best possible outcome for all involved. This is just kind of like adult stuff. Under the influence of psychedelics, especially high-dose mushrooms or LSD, you're really not in the best place to be speaking at all. Ideas of self, universe, parents, lovers, men, women, nations, religion, purpose all become a bit of a soup. Psychedelics have the ability to make one both more clear-headed and in touch with pure reality, less colored by our beliefs, but they can also make us deluded, to the point where we may either think we have it all figured out, or paranoid that we have nothing figured out, and everything we've ever known is a lie, or as common on LSD, we can feel like we're stuck in a loop. One time, another anecdote, on a rooftop in Jersey City with a whole bunch of young professional Indian guys listening to the Beatles, I found myself texting an ex, telling her I forgive her, that I forgive her mom and her sister, telling her I understands why everyone did what they did. And on one hand, like, I felt like that. I kind of was like, wow, everyone is like traumatized and everyone is reacting in a certain way based on what they think. Yeah, that's all true. Also, don't do this. As real and profound as your thoughts and feelings may be, it's better to sit on them or talk to those in your immediate environment and write them down. What's real and true will persist. Just as it's not a good idea to say text things in a flash of anger, it's likewise not ideal to send them in a flash of equanimity or like feeling like everything is beautiful. That may not apply tomorrow. Ideally, put your phone in a safe space, out of reach, say on a bedside table drawer, wherever you usually keep it, or maybe put it somewhere you don't usually keep it, but maybe write down where you usually keep it, that it's in another place. I mean, don't lose your phone. People do this all the time when they're under the influence. But don't be on your phone either. Or give it to someone sober who you trust to hold it for you until later. Yeah. That's my opinion from hard experience. Another anecdote that I didn't write down. I had a roommate. We had a falling out. And we were no longer roommates. And another time, while I was tripping, I'm like, yeah, that guy, he was like kind of a beautiful guy in his own way. He's a very strange man, but, I want to see how he's doing. I want to try to like reconcile things. And I wrote him like a short email. And then he wrote me back a long email about, well, I appreciate you reaching out, but actually, like, you did X, Y, and Z, and, I really just, and I'm just like, I didn't really want to do that. I thought that I didn't want to, but I think I go into this later, but your words are, okay, good, it's still recording. When you say something, you're not just saying something. If you're saying something to someone you care about, you're saying, you're starting something. You're starting a dialogue. So they get to respond, and then you have to respond to that, and then you have to respond. I mean, you don't have to. You can cut it off at any point. But I mean, the best things in life are a dialogue that carries forward. So just think about what you want to start. Because a lot of the messed upness of this world, dating and friendship is people ghosting each other. It's like a serious problem these days. One person is like investing emotionally, and then the other person's like, I thought maybe I wanted to do this, but actually, nah. And, that's super hurtful. Everyone's had it done to them, and you may have done it to others. And yeah, so just don't start something you're not willing to finish. And just wait a minute. Just like I said, I've said it like maybe 4 times already. Put your phone away. Deal with the people you're actually with. Anyways, yeah. I go on more. There's a common expression in our culture, talk is cheap. I mean, in English, probably in every culture. I don't know. You can post in the comments. There's an expression in culture, talk is cheap, but if you're a person of integrity, it shouldn't be. When you speak, especially to say something intensely positive or negative, you're starting a dialogue, so it pays to think carefully about whether you really want to have that dialogue. In the moment of the trip, you may have visions of mending a damaged relationship, for instance, but even if that beautiful idea is possible, it will take far more than just a poetic text, however profound. So as in sober life, take your thoughts with a grain of salt. Take the thoughts and ideas of others with a grain of salt, and try not to panic. 2 more pages, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope this is useful. I'd be remiss to not talk about underground group sessions with psychedelics. They're becoming increasingly popular because of demand, but also because they are very lucrative to the providers. Before I dive into this subject, I want to preface by saying I can understand people's skepticism of mainstream mental health care. I feel failed by it personally. Oh yeah, this is kind of the sensitive part, so feel free to skip the next 6 or 7 minutes if you're don't want to hear this stuff. I grew up as a highly medicated little boy, on Ritalin from age 7, on antidepressants, mood stabilizers, anti-anxiety pills, even antipsychotics to help sleep and act as mood stabilizers. I wasn't psychotic, but a lot of times, at least in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up, if you had depression, if you had extreme anxiety, they would give you these. I've been in various schools for troubled kids and seen how many drugs they were all on. One kid talked about receiving his Skittles every morning. He got a handful of 5 different colored pills. And I also did not feel this process was consensual. How can a kid really consent to taking drugs for his own good? If you're 7 years old and you're this drug will make you a good boy, will make you do what you're supposed to in school and get your teacher's approval and your parents' approval, maybe even your peers' approval if they try to sell it to you like that, you can't really consent to that. I'm not saying children should never be on medication, but I'm saying probably a lot fewer children than should be on medication, especially behavior change medication. Anyways, when I decided to quit Ritalin as a boy, I later found out it was being put in my orange juice. At a particularly messed up boarding school, I was pretty much waterboarded and forced to swallow my meds when I refused to take it. Yeah, that really happens. This school was eventually pressured to close. I'm in the process of doing an interview series on kids who attended. Yeah, DeSisto School. You can look it up. I'm doing interviews with people right now. I haven't posted any of them yet. It's heavy, right? Anyway, my best friend from college who later committed suicide was also highly medicated to the point where he gained 90 pounds due to the drugs he was on. He went from a skinny kid to obese in the course of 6 months or 9 months. I cannot blame his care entirely. He had a lot of trauma from his family, obsessive thoughts about his worth as a man due to dropping out of college, his height, so many insecurities. People have so many insecurities, and you don't really know it unless you're best friends with them, but kid was my best friend, so I knew it. And I blame myself somewhat, as well as his parents. Commas, gotta add commas. And I blame myself somewhat, as well as his parents had him in an alcohol rehab center, which I encouraged him to drop out of and come live with me. Unfortunately, a few of my friends at the time were alcoholics, and alcohol and mental health issues can be an awful combination. I do think if I could have given him a glimpse that there was another way to feel, a more expansive way, possibly it could have saved his life. Yeah. He was just in a really dark state. He was in that state for months and months and months and months on end, and he just felt like, I'm never going to get out of this, I'm never going to get out of this, I'm never going to get out of this, I'm never going to get out of this. And ultimately he didn't get out of it. And like I said, I feel a lot of guilt about the whole thing because I just wanted to hang out with him. I wanted to be his friend. I wanted to start businesses with him. I wanted to do a lot of things with him. He was a really kind, he was my best friend probably in my whole life. And this was from age 19 to 23 when he passed away. And I think if he could have just had even 4, 5, 6 hours of relief where he just was wow, I don't have to feel all this shame and self-disgust and like mistrust of the world and feeling like a failure, if he could have just gotten out of that for a short amount of time, maybe it would have helped. Maybe it wouldn't have helped. That's life. You can't go back in time and find out. But if this would have been a treatment legally available to him and he would have tried it, I think it potentially could have sent him in a different trajectory. And I like to think, regardless of that, if I knew now what I knew then, and I was a better friend and more supportive, I could have helped him. But I'm not going to beat myself up over it because I was just a kid myself at the time, going through my own struggles. We were living in the same city. We were living in New York City together, and then I moved to Florida. Like, I just went through this phase where I was like this raw food, vegan, wanting to live on the land. I moved in with this guy. Maybe go into that in a future video. It's beyond the scope of this video. And he was just kind of there, and a couple of my friends who were alcoholics kind of moved in with him, and it was just not good. And we talked all the time, but I could tell he was going in a bad direction, and I wish that I would have made different choices. But anyway, beautiful kid, beautiful young man, and yeah, I think this has life-saving potential, which is why I'm making this video, and I'm so in support of it. But it could also cause harm. It could even push someone over the brink, and I think that's important to talk about, because when you're only positive about something, people get very skeptical, because we live in an advertising society, and every day people are getting sold this miracle cure, that miracle cure, diets or religion, or you know this self-help book, this 4-point plan, and it's just overwhelming, and you just kind of have to insulate yourself from it. So I'm definitely not trying to act like this is some panacea, but I think it has a lot of potential to help people, and I think the research has already shown that, and the research will continue to show that. That's my opinion, and we'll see. So, anyway, so the reason I say all that, so with all that in mind, I can see why people lose faith in the medical system's idea of mental health treatment. So, a lot of people I've spoken to think that I'm saying don't take meds, don't trust doctors. I'm not saying that, but I can see why people feel that way, because people have been let down in a major way. So I understand why people feel that way, and I can understand why people would do alternatives and really put a lot of their emotional hopes and dreams into alternatives. So that said, trusting a back alley shaman and his natural medical cure, shaman in quotes, in a rented warehouse where he's going to hold space for you and 30 other vulnerable individuals for $200 a head, $6,000 made in one night, not bad. Maybe he spends, a couple $100 himself on the medicine, $1,500 profit. Think about that. May not be the best approach. I'm not saying these experiences can never be good, or that those running them do not have good intentions, but you are putting yourself at risk and entering into a vulnerable state in the hands of people with questionable training that you don't know. If you insist on having such an experience, I'd recommend a very small group and have a conversation with the person running it beforehand. Make sure they have honor and integrity, and what they will do if things go wrong. Like holding space for one person, holding space for yourself is hard enough. One guy and maybe a couple of assistants in a room full of 30 people, all who are desperate enough to put themselves in that situation, I wouldn't want to do that, and I wouldn't recommend for you to do that. But people are going to do what they're going to do, so at least talk to the person. Much smaller group. Don't do drugs in the rainforest or in a basement in Brooklyn with 30 people and pay a lot of money for it and have a lot of expectations about it. Trust your friends. Don't do that. Lastly, and this is more related to general health and particularly related to anything interpersonal, keep your real life in mind when planning journeys. If you have a day job or a family to take care of, I'd recommend a trip during the daytime. Obviously with someone else minding your kids or your elderly parents or whatever your responsibility are. Don't have responsibilities while you're doing this, ever. Just don't. I'd advise you that you'd be better off trying to keep your sleep schedule as normal as possible, as on days you trip, your recovery and integration will be the better for it. I think that's a lot of problems people have with with drugs, they go on benders, they don't sleep, and just don't do that. Just treat it like a medicine. Don't treat it like, if you treat it like, oh, I'm going to get effed up, I'm going to party, you're going to have an experience like that. If you're treating it like a medicine, you're more likely to have a medicinal experience. So I've gone over a lot of cautions. I'll try to end on a positive note. There is a lot of positive potential from psychedelics, done alone, in a clinical setting, or with loved ones. Note, do not attempt to take them in a position... do not attempt to take psychedelics in a position where you need to care for others, kids, elderly parents, etc., or even other adults. Don't do it. Like, this should go without saying, but this is the internet, so I'm going to say it. The older I get, the more I tend to agree with the meditation people that excessive use of even the best drugs is not ideal. The ideal should be to catch a glimpse of a more open, free, creative, and expansive brain state, and then do all you can to strive to achieve that state or close to it naturally. But that said, they are among the safest class of drugs, and hopefully with legalization and destigmatization, which will lead to quality control, with drugs made in a vetted lab, not by some hippie Jesse Pickman, and proper education. I'm really bad at reading parentheses. They will become safer still. Yeah, long story short, should be legal so you can get them from your pharmacy, trust the quality. There's a cultural image of psychedelics, left over from the 60s and 70s, of some young person tripping out and watching the walls melt and thinking they're Jesus. This is simply not my experience. To me, the beauty is not in seeing visuals or things that aren't there, but in seeing things, a tree, a person, oneself in a mirror, without the usual baggage and automatic labeling that comes with. If you've done this stuff, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can trip at a rave and see the beauty and humanity in a bunch of dancing strangers, but you could also do it in your backyard with nothing but a comfy chair, a yoga mat, maybe some Bluetooth speakers. I hope you can find the beauty in what you currently see as mundane and reach for a better version of yourself with the ultimate compassion for who you are and everything you've already accomplished. Finally, I want to point out that even my bad trips were ultimately valuable. I've only scratched the surface here regarding the variety of my ill-thought-out and unskillful trips. Trust me, I'm not lying. I want to send the message that unless the stars align just right and everything is just right, that you shouldn't have these experiences. Things are going not according to plan as part of life. These are just cautions. If things go a little off, like, this is not really something that can be easily controlled, which is why I think society has such a problem with it. Things not going to plan are a part of life. So, I think I've said enough. If you have any questions, hopefully this video can stay up. Again, I'll repeat for the final time, I'm not encouraging anyone to do anything illegal. Follow your local laws. Go to a place where you can do this stuff, or wait until it's actually legal. And I'm not also saying that you can't make emotional progress without this stuff. I think there's people who've never done this stuff in their life who can have very similar, open, expansive experiences through meditation or even prayer, like whatever you're into. I'm an atheist, but don't take this down, YouTube, because I think it can help people. If you have any comments, please let me know. Be safe, have fun. Feel free to add your own guidestones, your own kind of rules or guidelines in the comments below. And thank you for watching. Have a good one.